Welcome to the This Justin podcast by your host Justin, and today we talk about the Utah Jazz, who are currently the first seed in the Western Conference with a 25-6 record. Now they deserve a lot of praise for that accomplishment. It certainly isn't easy. We all know how difficult it is to compete in the Western Conference. Ask Luka Doncic. He's struggling right now. And listen, Utah deserves their credit. But with that being said, I think they're a bit overrated. And even though they have a great record, and even though they've got a lot of chemistry, obviously, which has led to a lot of their wins, I'm not that impressed with the Utah Jazz. And, it comes to a few reasons. Well, one of them are, you look at the games that the Utah Jazz has played within the last 10 games. I mean, it's not a huge accomplishment, in my opinion, they're getting wins against mediocre teams. And what do I mean by that? Well, last night, they beat the Charlotte Hornets. They would go on to lose to the Clippers, who are a legitimate title contender. They would beat the Clippers without Paul George and Kawhi. They would beat the Sixers without Joel Embiid, who's an MVP candidate in my opinion. They would beat a mediocre Heat team that has been struggling all year long. I don't know how they beat the Bucks. And I've always been suspect about the Bucks. Jazz, the Pacers, they're beating mediocre teams, and that's why I believe they got a good record. And let's look at their roster now. Their roster is nothing special, and I hate to say it, and I don't mean to, just completely criticize the Jazz, because especially today they don't deserve criticism, but. Look at their roster. Donovan Mitchell, who's a great young player. And I think he's going to get better. And I think he's going to be one of the best players in the league at some point. But I'm still not sold on Donovan Mitchell because he still needs to prove himself in the postseason. And I believe he will. And you could talk about last postseason. But last postseason, he choked a 3-1 lead. His team had a 3-1 lead. He choked, even though he played amazing. And he still has to show me that he could take his team to win a playoff series, which he might do this season. But, going back to the roster, Donovan Mitchell, Bojan Bogdanovic, who I've seen, I'm a Cavs fan. I remember when he was on the Pacers, and they took us to 7, and Bojan, I don't know how to say his name, was a huge part of it. He was just lighting us up. And the guy's averaging 18 points a game. I understand that. He's definitely someone I rely upon. I would rely upon during the postseason. Now you look at other guys. A Jordan Clarkson. I'm a Cavs fan. I remember when he was a part of my Cavs. And listen, I don't know if you can rely on this guy in the postseason. And especially, he's your third leading scorer. I believe he's averaging 18.3 points a game. Jordan Clarkson was a guy who played spectacular on my Cavs during the regular season when we traded for him. But come postseason, he was nowhere to be found. Now, I don't know if he's that guy, but I just think for any legitimate title contender, for this to be your third best option scoring-wise is a bit concerning. And you look at the other guys on this team, Mike Conley, who was an elite point guard at some point, but he's regressed. You look at Derek Favors, George. I just look at this, Rudy Gobert, but he's inconsistent offensively. I look at this Utah team, and I can't help but to think of the 2015 Atlanta team. Remember when the Atlanta Hawks won 60 games with, Paul Millsap, Kyle Korver, Jeff Teague? Remember that? I can't help but to think of that. They're a good team with solid role players, but when they face a legitimate team with stars, like a Cleveland Cavaliers team that the Hawks faced, they're going to get beat and beat bad. And I think if this Jazz team had to face, and probably will, the LA Clippers or the LA Lakers that both have stars, that have AD and LeBron, Kawhi and Paul George, and even a Denver Nuggets team that has Jamal and Jokic, I think they're going to get beat, and they're going to get beat hard. So to keep it short, this team deserves its credit, but they still need to prove that they could do this in the postseason. And I'm not sure they can.